Louis Rees wow, yeah, I really can't get his name. Louis Rees-Zammit is an international pathway player, former rugby star for Wales. He was one of the world's most exciting players, and he's quitting the sport to pursue his dreams of playing in the NFL. For those of you that are sort of geographically challenged, Wales, England, and Scotland make up the island of Great Britain, in case you were curious. But RC, on a more serious football note, let the audience know why you're qualified to talk about LRZ's impact in the NFL, and also how do you think he could potentially provide a positive contribution to the Chiefs?
And we're going to talk about what he could potentially bring for Dynasty for fantasy football purposes is what I really wanted to talk about, but it'll be in line with also talking about his NFL value and what he might bring to the Chiefs. First and foremost, we spent some time scouting how to pronounce his name properly, and you fumbled that right off the bat. So I'm glad you spoke first, because I probably would have done it if I spoke first. So let's practice. Louis Rees-Zammit, or LRZ. But he's an international pathway player. There's been 3 to 5 of those players make it through training camp, get a roster exemption. The teams get a special exemption if they carry an IPP, the international pathway player. So this has been going on. They've been doing this for like 10 years now, having this exemption or pushing this pathway program. And I have scouted the top players, or the perceived top players, coming into the program, coming into the NFL, getting an NFL opportunity as a scout in general for NFL draft purposes. I mean, these guys aren't draft worthy. They're like the Chiefs already signed their guy. But while I'm scouting for the NFL draft, this pathway program is going on, and they're having a special pro day. I scout all the top players. I look at all the pro day data to see if there's somebody there for fantasy purposes, dynasty purposes, what have you. And I scout all of the prospects, all of the top prospects, over 600 prospects a year for the last decade plus, for the NFL draft. So these guys just kind of fall in line with that. And in the past, I will go through the top guys. I'll give them a look as best I can. They're coming from all kinds of backgrounds. They're soccer players, basketball players, rugby players, you name it. So I will look at them. If their pro day numbers look like NFL athlete type numbers, I will take a look at them. We've had guys like Christian Wade, who's a former rugby player, who went in as a running back for the Buffalo Bills. And I think his high moment of his career was he had like a 70 or 80-yard touchdown run either in the preseason or late in a game, in a meaningless game in the NFL. That was about the peak of his. He had a flash of a moment. Other than that, it never really amounted to anything. One guy I kind of was interested in keeping an eye on from a couple years ago was a Chilean basketball player, Sammy Reyes. He made the Washington roster. He hung on as like a fourth tight end for maybe a year or two, and then I don't even know where he is at now. So he didn't make it. Typically, these IPP players, they're not going to make it in the league. They may catch on to the roster, but there's going to be no impact. There's no dynasty fantasy record of an IPP player that's the breakout star from another country, from another sport. But it's intriguing. It's always intriguing when these guys have a backstory and they have a great pro day. So then here comes Rees-Zammit. He makes headlines with the good pro day. The Chiefs sign him, so that draws. If he would have been signed by the Jacksonville Jaguars, it would have registered low on the Richter scale of fantasy dynasty news. Getting signed by the Chiefs draws a little bit more attention, fairly or unfairly. So I set out to scout. He's obviously the top guy that came out of their pro day. He's really the only one mainly that everybody was talking about. So I set out to scout LRZ. How do you do that? How do you scout a rugby player who's never played a lick of football at any level? I mean, rugby's got some football elements to it, obviously, but how do you even go about scouting this? So I do what I typically do. I take the pro day data, I put it into our system to try to get an analytics read, but they don't do all of the things at their pro day that the college guys do at the real combine. So I have to watch these players in their natural environment to try to get an idea of what their speeds or what a bench press might be if that's what's missing. So I set out to scout LRZ to fill in the blanks from his pro day and to just get a sense of how he looks in his natural environment playing rugby. So I watched several of his rugby highlights, and I mean, it's not apples to apples. You can see that he's probably the fastest guy on the field, but he wasn't considered the best rugby player in the sport. He was considered a big up and comer. He's the youngest this and the youngest that at different things. So he looks like he's going to be one of the good ones, one of the great ones potentially. But I don't follow rugby, so I don't really know what that means. I could just see he's pretty fast dude. And when you get the information that he was clocked at 24.2 miles per hour during one of his rugby matches. I think it's called a match, not a game. Clocked at 24.2, then if you see that in the news, that's hooked with, hey, that would have been the fastest time anybody was clocked with. If you look back at the 10 fastest guys from last year in the NFL, that Rees-Zammit would have the fastest time. Granted, he wasn't wearing football pads.
Yeah.
So if you take a little bit off for that, he's still, I mean, it's still something attention getting when you can run that fast. So I think a lot of people might look at him and go, here comes another long shot IPP player coming from rugby, never played. They're making a big deal about it. He's got this GPS number, and who cares about that? He didn't have football pads on. This is a Chiefs guy, so everybody's getting excited. Who cares? That was kind of my take going into the session of, I need to check this guy out at least, give him a look through, because he's the one that got signed by the Chiefs. He's the one that made some headlines.
And speaking of his pro day, RC, I think the way he caught headlines was that his 40-yard time, I think he was in the 4.4 or 4.5s. I think that's what really stuck out to people. I didn't read the article you have at all on your site where you scouted him in detail. So I'm just curious, do you think this guy actually can have a fantasy football impact, whether it's in Dynasty, this upcoming redraft? Like, where do you think he's going to fall?
That's the piece of the story, the piece of the puzzle that I'm about to drop in this that was, for me, was a little bit of a game changer. So you see the GPS speed, and it's intriguing. You see that he runs, around a 4.445 at his pro day. I hand timed it as well, and it came up right around that. It came up to an average of about 4.45. So, I mean, he can move, and he's running his pro day like the other guys are. So 4.45 in the way that the guys do it at the Indy Combine, it's impressive at 209 pounds. So I see that, and it compels me, like, I'm going to give this guy a chance. Let me do research, and really I was going into it more like, let me just dismiss him, or let me just put a giant question mark on him. Like, hey, here's this guy. He runs fast. He was good at rugby. He's going to try out for the Chiefs. so be it. That's where I thought it would go. I didn't even know if it'd be worthy of writing up. I thought he was just going to be a name that I put in the database to try to spit out an analytics grade on. But then I watched his pro day work, which involved running routes, catching passes. But then they have now in the YouTube era, there's a TV show about online on YouTube from the NFL that shows these guys in training. And there's also kind of separate clips by the IMG Academy, who was specifically training Rees-Zammit. So you could see some of the video work of him running routes, doing drill, all that kind of doing stuff with a football. And I was stunned, maybe overstating it, but I was surprised at how good this guy runs routes from a wide receiver position. When I first saw him run the routes, and on my scouting report, there's links to a couple examples of what I was seeing. He runs routes. The first thing I thought of when I saw him is, this looks like what Cooper Kupp does. And Cooper Kupp's one of the top route runners in the league for the last several years. He may be starting to fade from that, but he's still a legit guy. But as I looked at it some more, I'm like, reminds me of Cooper Kupp, but it also reminds me of Puka Nacua in that same vein, that they're bigger guys. He's like 6'2 plus, 209 pounds. He's about the similar size to Nacua. Maybe just he's a little bit bigger, but he makes those cuts like that. The best way I can explain it is, those what Cooper Kupp would be famous for, and other guys too, but maybe more Cooper Kupp over the past couple of years. They're down near the goal line. Cooper Kupp starts to go inside. He's lined up to the right. He starts going to the left, but he just stops immediately on a dime, almost does a 360, and then goes to the right, and the cornerback can't recover, and he's wide open, and it's an easy 5-yard touchdown. Stafford knows it's coming, and it's like it was an automatic thing between him and Stafford. Rees-Zammit runs those kind of routes. Like in his practice, granted, he's in shorts and a t-shirt. I think he might have even had pads on for one of them. His footwork is just like those guys, which really caught me by surprise. Then they show him catching passes within that, and it's a lot of one-hand catches and all that. Like he's got an extra sticky glove because he's unnaturally catching some of the passes one-handed. But there's tape of him working at the IMG Academy, where he's training to be an NFL player for the last several months. They'll put NFL cornerbacks, like fringe level guys that aren't on a team at the moment, or maybe guys that just retired, and they're kind of mercenaries hired by IMG to work out at corner to let these guys work against them, see how they do. And he was roasting the guys he was covering, because he has that Puka Nacua cut ability where he can do the Cooper Kupp zigzag, and Nacua can do that too, but Nakua's better even going further downfield and then kind of slanting in or slicing out, and the corner gets deceived, and all of a sudden Nakua's open.
And he's not a small guy, RC. He's 6'3".
Yeah, he's a big guy. He's a little bigger than Nacua is. So I was pleasantly surprised. Of all of the guys I've watched in the International Pathway Player Program, on the offensive side, and I've looked at defensive guys and a little bit of the offensive linemen, this is the best player, especially on offense, that I have ever seen in this program. from the best of my ability of being able to scout it without having the tape to scout. Um, but even more surprising, or I don't know, surprising is not the right word, but uh, potentially valuable information in for Dynasty Fantasy. They're listing him as a running back because he's got the size, and you see him in rugby and he's running the ball. That's it. He gets his notoriety from. If you put on some highlight tape, that'll show him in rugby, running the ball, and he's good at it. But I would say he's probably an average running back prospect. And I can't really see. I saw him run some drills against bags and weaving in and out. So I mean, he's got the moves and he's got the speed, but he doesn't look like a natural running back per se. And that's a hard position to just come out of nowhere and decide, hey, I'm a running back. It's a lot easier to jump in and go, hey, I'm a wide receiver. I don't have to take 15 carries and remember how to block or any of that kind of stuff. I can just go out and run routes, see ball, catch ball. So he's working as a running back. They signed him and list him as a running back, and they're talking about his return ability because of the new rules for the kick returns and all that. And he has the rugby background, so there's some logic to it. But I don't think he's a running back at all. I think he's a really interesting looking wide receiver prospect. Now, they may put pads on him, and 250-pound guys may knock his block off and he cowers in a corner and he's done. There's always that possibility. I realize these guys don't normally work out from rugby or basketball or soccer or boxing or wherever they come from. These international players on skill position just doesn't work out. This is the best guy I've seen, natural talent, most fluid talent, and I think it's going to be at wide receiver. And given that it's the Kansas City Chiefs, there's going to be a high profile from it, obviously.
They're going to find a way to use him, right? Like Andy Reid loves to come up with these weird formations.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll give him some jet sweeps and get him involved in different things if he can handle it. You got Rashee Rice. We don't know what his status is going to be. That's an empty wide receiver room aside from Marquise Brown. If Rice goes down, they don't have a lot of talent. This is a draft loaded with wide receivers, so I'm sure they're going to go after one, but Kansas City has been notorious for going after the wrong ones. So this might be a guy that's coming in as a running back under the radar while Rashee Rice may be suspended and Kansas City strapped because it's not like they're super flushed with cash and that there's a lot of wide receivers out there yet for the veteran ones for them to go out and get. I'm sure there will be, and I'm sure they'll go that route potentially, but they've not been great at scouting or getting free agent wide. They always seem to get the wrong ones. From McCole Hardman to Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore has flopped, and Marquise Valdes-Scantling wasn't anything great. So this guy is joining one of the worst wide receiver rooms. I mean, one of the best team in the league and the worst wide receiver room. If he can make a breakthrough with Patrick Mahomes on the Kansas City Chiefs from a dynasty fantasy perspective, this could be something. I'm not suggesting he's a guaranteed star, but I'm guessing from the dynasty rookie drafts that I've seen, he isn't even. You hope that your platform even has him listed as available to draft, one, and then two, he's already signed by the Chiefs, so in some leagues he's a free agent to be picked up. You don't have to wait for the rookie draft, but he is considered a rookie. He will probably be in most people's rookie draft only to get him. So if you have a deeper rookie draft, you start going 45, 55 plus players deep. This is a name I'm not overlooking where normally I wasn't even going to really take this guy seriously and look that deep at him. And then I saw some of the workout tape and I was like, holy crap, this is not a running back. This is Puka Nakua potentially. See what
RC.
happens when he gets the shells on.
Yeah, then that's the biggest thing, right? Like we haven't seen him run with pads, we haven't seen him take an NFL hit, but I'm curious now. I know this wide receiver draft class is deep, so let's not use this one as a comp, but if he were to actually enter the NFL draft, is it possible that as a rugby player that is showing all this promise to make the leap over to the pros, is it possible that he actually gets drafted?
That is an excellent question that I hadn't even really thought of because he's obviously already on a team. But if I were to say, I would think, based on what I've seen and what he was able to clock, and the money that Kansas City gave him was no chump change, I'd say he'd probably be a sixth plus rounder, sixth, seventh rounder. I don't think he would last to undrafted free agent status. And again, Kansas City, I think, will get the exemption to be able to carry him on the roster and it not penalize him. He's like an extra player. If it's a 53-man roster, he can be player 54 for carrying an IPP player is, I believe, how it's going to work with him. But regardless, I think there's enough. If he would have went through a full combine, we got all of the numbers and got more official numbers, and then got to see him run the gauntlet and make all those catches. And if he looked as good as he does in his training at the IMG Academy, and they have similar drills at their pro day, but if he was on that bigger stage against all those top players, I think he'd probably get himself drafted.
That's crazy to think about. A guy that hasn't played.
Yeah, with no background.
Exactly. Like not even a snap of college football, high school football, and he might actually get drafted. But here's the thing, RC, the rules are very different now versus back then, like even 5-10 years ago, right? It's evolving to promote more and more offense. And maybe in a league like this, somebody like LRZ could succeed and be a impactful fantasy player.
And the general vibe right now is look at the crazy, or look at the unique rugby fast guy. This is cute. Maybe he can return kicks for us because that's kind of like rugby. That's my general stat when I ask people, tell me what you think about, Rees-Zammit, what comes to mind, and it's that, like, return game, and in the running back potential, and rugby is rough, so maybe he's rough and tough, so maybe he's going to be able to be a running back, but he can probably be cute returning kicks and all that. Nobody talks about the receiving side because it just hasn't been. I have not seen it on any web. I was doing a bunch of research once I saw him running his routes and all of that, and I was amazed, and I'm like, there's something here. So I wanted to see what other people were saying about him, but it's the same canned thing. He 24 mile an hour GPS. He's fast. He's a good rugby player. Boy, this is going to be good for returning kicks in the new era. They signed him as a running back. Hopefully he can do something, and then moving on because everybody thinks these guys are destined to fail, which I get. But to me, there's something a little different here.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the most exciting guy I could even remember coming out of this IPP path. And you already talked about it, but him going to the Chiefs, not only do they have one of the best quarterbacks in the league, a dynamic offense, but they have a head coach that's, we see time and time again, tries to do something creative. So he has upside offensively, but I think your point about kick returns, especially this year, I think that, the reason why those rules changed, the NFL is trying to promote more scoring, right? So we're going to see more kicks being returned, and people like LRZ, potentially having a fantasy impact there, just getting kickoff return touchdowns. Another player that comes to mind in that regard is maybe Cordero Patterson, who might not have any offensive upside, but he'll have special teams upside in fantasy.
And if Rasheed Rice is suspended for some stretch of time, or if he's sent to jail, I don't think that's going to happen. But it's at least it's on the table. It's not nothing. So Rasheed Rice is in a shaky situation. What if Marquise Brown has lost his juice like it looked like he had last year with Arizona? He had a foot issue. He may be all healed up from it and may all be fine. But what if he isn't? What if Marquise Brown is fading out of the NFL, which is why Arizona was like, good luck to you. We know you're Kyler Murray's best friend, but see you later. The Chiefs could be in some real danger at wide receiver, and then this guy's walking in the door, and if he starts doing some, neat things in the return game, but then they start seeing him run the routes, it's going to be something. And when he goes to training camp, it's like last year they had undrafted free agent Deneric Prince. All I saw all preseason was how good Deneric Prince was. Kansas City's got themselves the next gem running back. He's like Isaiah Pacheco. This is awesome. This is the great. And then I think he was put on the practice squad and didn't really hear anything from him. I say that in that we could see all of this when people start seeing Rees-Zammit, just like Quentin Johnston was incredible in training camp and then sucked when they really started playing, as we suspected all along. There's going to be a moment where Rees-Zammit looks, because it's just a story that's going to warrant a lot of attention from the media. So if he goes out and he burns some people in routes and is looking good, and it's the Kansas City Chiefs, this just story is going to start writing itself. He's going to have value. You may want to cash in on that value in Dynasty if you pick him up off the free agent wire, or you draft him in the 5th or 6th round or whenever. You may flip him to somebody who gets heated about this Kansas City Chief thing when they start talking about him like he was faster than Tyreek Hill. I've seen the Chiefs fan. This is the next Tyreek Hill. So you may be able to get a flip out of this if you really don't believe in him. But I think this story is going to have legs in the preseason. But I think there's something here.
That's incredible, RC. He reminds me a little bit of like what we would think of like an NFT, like, back then, people investing in it like crazy, being driven by the hype or whatever. Obviously, for better or for worse, like that really didn't pan out too well. But maybe LRZ, you don't know if he's going to hit or not. So even if you don't believe in him,
yeah. And I'm talking about for the cost. If we're sitting here talking and he was, a first round ADP in Dynasty rookie drafts, it'd be one conversation. But this is like, is he even listed in my league? He might be available in your free agents right now. Yeah. Because he is technically he's not a rookie, he is a free agent for fantasy.
And if he is, why not give him a roster spot and see where it goes?
Because you might be able to flip him. You may not believe in any of this and think this will be another failed IPP player, which it probably will be. If you force me to bet $1 million whether he was going to be an impactful NFL player or not, I'd have to take the no, just because of the history and it's such a tough transition. I'm just saying you could put 100% surety no on most all of these guys coming from the international program. Really good ones you might put 95% bet against. This is more like 50-50. Like, I don't know that he's destined to fail, and he's a good looking guy, and he's a celebrity in Europe. I don't think the Chiefs will give up on him quickly either. They're gonna keep him around. He just makes for good TV. When he starts, he'll be like Jimmy Garoppolo, only with a sweet British accent. He may have all the Taylor Swift fans, football fans, all the 13-year-old females that are Chiefs fans. They may switch their allegiance to him. He's got He's got movie star looks and he's talented. So I don't think he's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, he's going to have to be really bad. And then even then, Kansas City can just hold on to him with the roster exemption for the IPP player.
Yeah, why not? If he's
and
an
just
extra
groom
player.
him over 3 years.
Yeah.
Give him a couple years opportunity.
I mean, as if Kansas City didn't have enough attention with the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
From that
really
perspective alone, it's brilliant.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. And for those of you that want even more details on LRZ and his impact, go check out RC's article on it on ffmetrics.com. RC, any closing thoughts on LRZ before we head out?
I am ready to suddenly I can't wait to see an IPP player in the preseason. Oh. That's a shocking enough statement.
It's going to be interesting. I think preseason is going to tell us a lot too, but if you're able to pick him up from now, definitely pull the trigger. Why not? Low risk investment.
Him versus what's that guy from basketball from NC State, DJ Burns?
DJ Burns, yeah, where they're saying he might.
He's going to start getting a look at tight end. Teams have been calling, and his same thing. He can sign with any. I think he can sign with as a free agent. He doesn't have to. He's not technically draft eligible. I'm not sure how that would work with a basketball player, but he won't get drafted. But I from what I've seen, and I'm going to scout Burns as the best I can, the same way that I did Rees-Zammit. But just looking at the body of Burns, I'm not a big. I used to love basketball. I used to watch it all the time. Used to love March Madness. I don't have time for it now. But I just happened to catch while I was on the road. I happened to catch some of the NC State Final 8 game against Duke, and they were making a big deal over this guy. And then they showed him, and I'm like, he looks like an overweight rec league player. Like, how is this guy good? And then he went out there and he was good. So I don't know anything more than that about him, but from what I've seen of Burns on the basketball court and what I've seen from Rees-Zammit in rugby and his workouts, I'll take Rees-Zammit 1,000 times out of 1,000 versus DJ Burns as mega dart throws in a Dynasty rookie draft.
Yeah, well said. All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and definitely check out more articles coming out on this. I'm sure we're going to drop more content as the preseason approaches, and definitely during the preseason as well.